Welcome to the webinar, Understanding Where AI Adds Value in R&D, Accelerating Materials Discovery. My name is Kristen Marshall, Associate Research Director here at Lux, and I will be moderating today's session. Presenting today is my colleague Akshay Chowdhury, analyst here at Lux. Throughout the webinar, you can type any questions you have in the questions box on your screen. Time permitting, we will answer all the questions that we can. If your question does not get answered, please do not hesitate to email it to questions@luxresearchinc.com and we will respond. And if at any point you experience any technical difficulties, such as a frozen screen, simply refresh your browser and check that your internet connection is strong. Now, let's jump into today's discussion. Take it away, Akshay.
Thank you, Kristen. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today, I want to talk about a very simple question. Where does AI actually add value in materials R&D? So materials innovation has always been hard, but what has changed is the pressure. Companies need better materials faster with less room for wasted efforts. And across batteries, hydrogen, carbon capture, and advanced electronics industries, materials are being asked to do more. They need higher performance, lower cost, fewer scarce resources, and also faster commercialization. At the same time, the R&D teams are facing tighter budgets and shorter timelines. So the challenge is not simply to invent a better material, but to make the full development process faster and more efficient. And naturally, that leads to a question: can we just ChatGPT this? Of course, not literally, but the excitement is real because AI promises to search larger design spaces, learn from complex data, and help teams make better decisions. And the market has noticed that. The investment in material informatics has increased sharply, with more than $600 million raised in 2025 alone. And also, we are seeing major headlines, large funding rounds, new entrants, partnerships with large industrial players. And this is no longer a niche research topic, and it's gaining quite a lot momentum. So the industry is understandably, of course, excited, and AI is starting to dream new materials. But dreaming only is the first step here. And this is where we need to pause. AI can dream, but can it help us realize those materials? More importantly, where should companies apply AI so that it creates measurable impact? That's the question I want to unpack today. And I will do this in three parts. First, I will introduce a framework for evaluating AI value across the materials development workflow. Second, I will apply that framework to three different materials examples. And third, I will close with what this means for building an AI roadmap for materials R&D. So let's start with the first step and also look at the materials workflow. A simple materials development workflow has 6 steps. As you can imagine: design, synthesis, processing or formulation, characterization, testing, and finally manufacturing and scale up. Of course, the exact workflow changes by material, but this structure gives us a meaningful starting point. Material is not just valuable because it looks promising on the paper. It has to be made, processed, measured, tested, produced at scale. So AI needs to be evaluated across the full workflow and not only at the discovery stage. When we zoom in, each step breaks into many specific subtasks. For example, design can mean selecting molecules or structures. Synthesis can mean controlling uh, or preparing, or also EDA optimization. Processing can mean mixing, structuring, testing and characterization can be experimental and validation test. And this is why AI value is not uniform. Different steps have different constraints, and different kind of AI will matter in different places. And the AI application now span almost every part of the workflow. At the front end, we see large language models for literature review, accelerated density function theory, simulation tool, and generative molecular design software. In the middle, we see high automated synthesis, high throughput experimentation, design of experiments, optimization, and also some machine learning models for testing and characterization. And at the back end, we have process digital twins. And across everything, you have R&D management platforms that are trying to connect data and come up with better decision-making frameworks. So companies are not exactly facing a shortage of AI use cases today. They are facing the opposite problem. Too many possible tools, too many vendors, too many promises. And the practical question for R&D leader is, where do we start? And the answer cannot be where the AI looks most impressive. It has to be where AI can solve a meaningful R&D constraint. And to answer that exact question, we use a three-step process. First, we evaluate AI application value, where AI automate work, improve prediction, or improve decisions. Second, map the severity of the bottlenecks. Where does the material workflow actually slow down or become expensive or create failure risk? And third, decide where to apply AI by looking for that overlap. The best opportunities are, of course, where AI is useful and the workflow is truly constrained. So let's start with the first question. Where can AI create meaningful value? We simplify AI value into two axes. The first is automation value. AI reduces manual work, speeds repetitive tasks, or increases throughput. The second is knowledge value. AI helps teams to see patterns, relationships, or design options. So simply put, it's automation saves time, knowledge improves decision making. And the strongest AI use case often do both. They help team move faster and also learn faster. The top right quadrant is what we call rock stars. And these are high automation, high knowledge tasks. Areas like screening, optimization, and repeated learning cycle, those fit here. And this is usually where AI has the best chance to create meaningful impact. These, another quadrant, the professors are high in knowledge value, but lower in automation value. And these are expert heavy tasks where AI can surface options or patterns, but the scientific judgment still carries a decision. And AI augments the expert rather than replacing the workflow in this case. Third, we have administrators. And these are, on the opposite side, are high in automation value, but lower in knowledge value. These are repeatable workflows where AI improves speed, consistency, and throughput. They matter, but they may not fundamentally improve the performance of the material. And then there are interns, tasks where AI saves time, some efforts, but the impact on cost, timeline, or success rate is very limited. This does not mean that they are useless. It means they are not where the R&D organization should begin if the goal is strategic impact with AI. Now, that brings me to the second question: where is the workflow actually constrained? A use case can look attractive for an AI, but if it does not address a real bottleneck, it may not deserve priority. For this analysis, a bottleneck is any step that materially slows progress, increases cost, or raises failure risk. In one material, it may be design. In another, it may be synthesis, reproducibility, or maybe testing or scale up. So we score these bottleneck severity using three practical dimensions. First, technical complexity. How hard is the task scientifically from an engineering standpoint? Then time impact. How much does this step slow the overall program or materials development? And third, the iteration burden. How costly and difficult it is to repeat and improve this specific step and bottleneck. We then translate that into low, medium, and high severity. So low severity creates, of course, friction, but it's manageable. Medium severity creates delays, and you might have to go for some rework. And for the high severity is the critical one. It can materially slow development, increase cost, increase the chance that the material never reaches the commercial deployment. And here is what that logic looks like for battery electrodes. So there are constraints across the workflow, but the most severe constraint in this case is scale up and manufacturing. Battery performance, of course, depends not only on that active material, electrode material, it depends on formulation, processing, qualification, and also integration into manufacturing. And we have done this analysis for 9 different materials as a part of a broader Lux efforts to understand where AI creates value across these different R&D workflows. Of course, I'm not going to present all of these 9 materials today, but I'll be happy to discuss them later with you. So for this analysis, we evaluated 9 material categories, 17 development substeps for each material, and mapped severity based on 35 interviews we conducted with researchers and, of course, R&D leaders in chemicals and materials companies. And that allowed us to compare very different materials on a common basis. And the pattern we found is that each material has a different constraint profile. Some are design constraint, other are process, validation, or scale-up constraint. Now the final step is to bring the two views together. One view tells us where AI can create value. The other tells us where the workflow is constrained. And the highest priority use case are where these two things overlap. So this chart shows the decision logic. Each point is a potential AI use case or workflow or activity. So some score high on knowledge value, some score high on the automation value, and some score on both. But quadrant position alone is not enough. A use case can look attractive and still be low priority if it does not really address that real bottleneck. So a strong use case where AI value overlaps with a bottleneck severity, and in this case, it's F. So this is where AI can shorten that learning cycle reduce unnecessary experiments, or improve decision quality. Weak use cases may be still interesting, but they are less likely to move the needle for the business or the success of that materials development program. Now, with this framework in place, let's apply it to different materials. I'll walk through three examples: battery electrodes, electrocatalyst, and metal organic frameworks or MOPs. So first, let's start with battery electrode materials. Now, of course, battery electrodes are very attractive. They attract a lot of attention in the AI because performance gains are valuable. There is a lot of commercial value, financially very attractive due to the energy transition. Um, uh, and also, these materials are hard to develop because the testing is expensive and the development space is very constrained or complex. So battery electrodes, as we discussed this earlier, face constraint across design, processing, characterization, and testing as well. But the critical issue is that performance uh, emerges from that full electrode system. So slurry formation, dispersion, coating, drying, structure, cycle life, safety, uh, and manufacturing variability all interact with each other. And it has impact on that overall material success. And that is why the scale up becomes so important. A promising material can still fail if it cannot be processed and validated at that system level. Now, when we overlap the bottlenecks onto the AI value framework, the most attractive opportunities are not only early discovery. So, processing optimization, long cycle testing prioritization, and manufacturing integration become especially important in this case because they sit close to the commercial constraint. AI can help here, of course, navigate the formulation space, connect process conditions to parameter, help you simulate or accelerate the simulation, or screen those materials spaces, but only if it learns from that manufacturing relevant data. And that brings me to an interesting point. The implication is simple here. Of course, the discovery matters, but discovery is not enough in this case. Without a system level feedback, the probability of failure remains very high in this case. The strongest battery AI strategies connect discovery and the subsequent stages, especially they will create these manufacturing learning loops from the beginning. And this is also evident in some of the examples. So here's the example of a company called Wildcat Discovery. The company used AI-assisted cathode discovery and high throughput experimentation and raised significant capital. But it later acquisition at much lower implied value shows how commercialization risk can actually compress expectations in this case. And the lesson is not that AI discovery has no value, but here for battery, it must be tied to a system level validation. And of course, manufacturing readiness from day one uh, is important, and how you take that into consideration during the development of those materials becomes an important factor. Now let's look at a different material, uh, that is electrocatalyst. This is a different kind of problem because AI and computation already have a stronger upstream role in screening, simulation, and also design in this case. Also, there is significant open source data available for these materials, especially for the small molecules. So for electrocatalysts, they are important for a lot of the emerging technologies for CO2 to X conversion in hydrogen production and many other applications. So if we look at the overall development process for the electrocatalyst, of course, there are constraints in design, uncertainty around active sites, the gaps between the DFT predictions and the real world performance of these materials. The synthesis is actually a major bottleneck because controlling that nanostructure, composition, support interactions, and reproducibility is very difficult. The subsequent stages like characterization and testing also matter because active sites can change under operating conditions. So the real challenge is connecting these lab scale results to realistic industrial performance. So if we put this on the framework, electrocatalysts show a strong AI potential upstream. AI can search composition spaces, support multi-objective optimization, and improve also screening. But the harder bottlenecks are synthesis, reproducibility, also characterization, durability, and property variation at scale. So AI value depends on quality of that experimental feedback and also the validation data you might get from the pilot or the scaled project. So the conclusion is that companies should look beyond this AI-driven catalyst discovery. The more durable advantage comes from pilot scale testing, course characterization, and having a proprietary validation data sets that complement the open source database. So the public data and simulation can help you start, but they are not enough to win in this space because at up to some point, the materials and the new materials that you could discover from these sources or open source databases and their application value will reduce because everyone is using that database. And to highlight this very specific use case, you can look at a company called Matic. The company is not only applying the models to the public data, it's also generating proprietary experimental data through high throughput experimentation. And they use nano scale lithographic methods to generate thousands of these materials and test these assays in a rapid format and get that data and update their models to predict the material properties. So they are complementing the open source databases with their own proprietary data. And it has seen some success. So its collaboration with Harrius on the low iridium catalyst shows that why you need this proprietary databases and how you could actually successfully reduce or improve the performance of these materials. So in catalyst development, the durable advantage is the feedback loop between synthesis, testing, and model learning. Now let's look at the third example, that is metal organic framework. So MOFs are structurally very rich. Of course, you have chemical properties as well as because of those structures, you get additional benefits from these materials. And it's very attractive for AI-enabled discovery because the design space is enormous. Also, there are several potential applications across carbon capture, hydrogen storage, and also in filtration. And also, you may know, in 2025, Nobel Prize in Chemistry was actually awarded to development of MOPS. So when we look at the materials, the MOPS development process, AI can help generate and screen large number of structures. But the key bottleneck is manufacturability. MOA, the MOF may look promising at lab scale, but commercialization requires reproducible synthesis, stable structure formation, shaping into useful forms, moisture, thermal stability, and it should be done at acceptable cost. And also the production process needs to be standardized. So the constraint is not lack of ideas. You could generate a lot of different mob structures and materials for various applications, but the constraint is turning those ideas into scalable materials that will maintain the properties and perform a similar way that they did in the lab scale or in the lab environment. So when you map this on the framework, AI has clear value in design and prediction, but the highest severity issue remains scale up. And that means AI workflows for mobs need to include the synthesis yield, crystallization stability, let's say shaping, cost, and real operating conditions early in the design process, because that's the most critical bottleneck, and uh, that needs to be considered during the design phases. So the AI value in MOPS is limited not by the lack of applicability, but by uh, where the bottleneck sits. If a structure cannot be synthesized reproducibly or shaped properly, or the discovery speed does not really then translate into the commercial value in this case. So the priority is scalable production and integrating that process performance data into the design phase and training the model to accommodate that information and basically designing for the manufacturing as well. And there are, of course, some efforts in that direction. So Cusp AI is a good forward-looking example here. It's multi-agent platform can generate new mob structures. And the company has raised significant capital with the ambitions to build the self-driving laboratories to help them fast track that synthesis process and generating more data to train those models. And also that kind of shows strong confidence in that AI-enabled discovery. But the MOF lesson remains. Use AI to accelerate discovery, but if you really want to compress the overall materials development cycle and ensure that the materials developed are commercially successful, uh, don't let that discovery outspace the manufacturability. Now, we looked at all these three different examples, and the message is very consistent across these examples. AI creates real value. It definitely accelerates some parts of the process, but the value changes depending on the material and the bottleneck. So let's zoom out from these examples and turn this into a practical roadmap for AI-enabled materials R&D. So this roadmap has two layers. The top row is about use case priorities. So as we discussed so far, map the bottleneck, select the use cases where AI overlaps with that bottleneck, then build those closed loop systems so each experiment improves the next decision. The bottom row is about foundations, data, uh, decision making, and also about manufacturing integration. And without those foundations, even the right use cases will struggle to scale. So I want to dive a little deeper into this foundation capability. So adopting AI is not just a software decision. First, companies need clean and connected data from experiment, simulation, characterization, testing, manufacturing, and they also need physical infrastructure such as automation, sensors, high throughput testing environments, and of course, collecting all that data automatically. Second, they need an organizational integration. So scientists and engineers that are using these tools, first they need to trust those tools and they should know how to interpret these outputs. And when the human judgment matters the most, they should be aware of those constraints. And third, given the scale up challenges, it is essential to break down the information silos across the R&D and the manufacturing function, and in general, across your organization. So think about the integration of manufacturing into your materials development cycle from day one. So that brings to an interesting point because the AI adoption is not just about the technology roadmap. It is a learning system roadmap. And the question is not only which AI platform should we buy, the better question is how do we build a system that learns faster around our most important bottlenecks. And now with that, I will leave you with three takeaways. First, AI does not create value everywhere equally, as we saw through those examples. Its value depends on us, its data, and the bottleneck. Second, the biggest bottleneck is rarely where the AI hype is. Discovery, of course, gets a lot of attention, but the subsequent stages, synthesis, testing, scale up, may be the true constraint for a lot of the materials. And third, the winning organizations who combine the AI experiments, domain expertise in close learning loops, uh, they will have the competitive advantage. The, the team that learns fastest around their bottlenecks will benefit the most from this AI and will be able to build that competitive advantage in the longer term. And when you want to use some of these insights and of course if you want to implement it across your organization, uh, this translates into 4 actions. First, diagnose before you deploy. Identify the workflow stage that is genuinely rate limiting in your materials R&D workflows. Second, prioritize one high value use case first. Pick the overlap between AI value and, of course, the bottleneck severity, and then scale from there. Third, audit your data infrastructure. Define the specific training and validation data for each AI use case and work towards that. Fourth, build that manufacturing integration from day one, including manufacturability, process windows, cost, quality, and scale of feedback, whatever data you could get from that manufacturing setup, include that in your design cycle and materials R&D so that your learning becomes faster and the probability of success improves with that. And with that, I'd like to thank you everyone for joining and listening. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you so much, Akshay. So we will now be taking questions that you may have on the presentation, which you can type into the questions box on your screen. If we don't get to your question today, someone from Lux will be in touch after the webinar. Awesome. Okay, so Akshay, this first question. So a lot of vendors claim they can accelerate materials development. But what signals should folks look for to know whether a vendor has real technical value rather than just an impressive model or interface?
That's an interesting question because given that there are so many players that are emerging in this space, this is especially very interesting. So in my conversation with a lot of the clients and also what we are seeing is I think the platforms who have specific domain expertise, uh, which target specific workflows, which align with your materials workflows, development workflows, they are best suited. So I would look for that first. Second, it's about the data, like what sort of data is needed to train the model on these platforms, whether you need to bring your own data or these platforms are bringing their own data and also helping you build the model. So depending on your data availability, you could choose the platform accordingly, who helps you the most with the data and building that model. And I think the third point is about the uh, especially about the impact it can have. So whether it's having impact on the candidates visualization, whether it's reducing your experiment number of experiments, reducing waste. So I think that you need to also evaluate and how much these platforms can have impact on that your bottleneck that you're trying to solve. So I would look at these three factors and decide based on that which vendors to go for.
Great. So the next question, so you emphasize closed learning loops in manufacturing integration, but in practice, what should companies do first if their experimental data, testing data, and manufacturing data are still, fragmented across teams?
I think this is not. Uh, this is not just a problem with one company. It's a problem across the sector, especially heavy industries where they have a lot of information silos. So, of course, I'm not going to say you should start with like perfect enterprise-wide data system. That will usually take too long. You will see the ROIs very late and might lose motivation to actually work towards that. So I would start with something high value use case with where you have specific data needs. Also, uh, first step is to choose that use case, standardize the data for that one workflow. You can select a small team, and ideally, it should be around new products that you're trying to develop. So you can start fresh. And then with that, you could actually show that example that you accelerated that process. And you could immediately show that there are some advantages to using AI. And then uh, that's the starting point. And then you go for that focused integration and not the full digital transformation of your R&D function. So I start with that specific use case and that focused integration first.
Awesome. Yeah, and this is a good follow-on because I know that there are companies that can maybe even help with some of this. But how should companies decide whether to build AI capabilities internally or work with some of these external vendors that are out there?
Yeah, and having spoken with a lot of these clients and their internal teams who are building some of these tools, I think this is also an interesting question because, uh, again, like whether to build this internally or uh, partner with some of these platform, and then who owns the data, what's the model structure looks like, that becomes a real issue. So I would not really frame it as like build versus buy at the beginning. I'd frame it as like what capabilities needs to be owned and where what can be accessed and externally or maybe outsourced. So companies should usually own the problem definition, the data strategy, the experimental feedback loop, And the final technical judgment, of course, because they are the ones who are paying for it. And those are too close to competitive advantage, so it cannot be really fully outsourced. The external vendors, however, can be useful for, let's say, where you lack some of the model development capabilities or platform capabilities or workflow tools or automation tools. And those specialized capabilities then you could uh, bring, and then if you if you try to build those capabilities in house, it's a bit challenging. So to accelerate that, you could simply collaborate with these players. So I would again say it's a hybrid approach. Use vendors to accelerate capabilities development, but make sure that the learning loop, the proprietary data, and the experimental or the domain expertise remains inside the organization, so that you could leverage that for your competitive advantage.
Great. So I think that was the last question. So thank you so much, Akshay. That concludes our webinar for today. The slide presentation and recording from this webinar will be sent to all attendees via email. After leaving the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a survey on today's presentation. We would very much appreciate any feedback that you have, which just goes to help inform and improve on future webinars. Additionally, you might be curious what's on the screen here. We're conducting our annual innovation survey that focuses on innovation benchmarking and risk. So we encourage you to participate in the survey. It should take only 5 to 10 minutes to complete. And you can remain anonymous if you choose, but by participating, you're going to receive the results of the survey and you can see where your team ranks amongst other leading innovators. And so feel free to scan the QR code that you see on the screen. Otherwise, you will see the QR code in the slides that we send later today. Finally, take a moment, check out our upcoming webinars. Thank you so much for joining and have a great day.
Right.